Something extraordinary just happened in Washington, and if you care about what's going on inside the United States military right now, you need to hear every single word of this. A group of senior military commanders, people who have spent their entire careers following orders, staying silent, and never stepping into the political arena, just broke that silence in the most dramatic way possible. They went public, they stood before cameras, and they refused to back Donald Trump. Not quietly, not through back channels, publicly on the record with their names attached. This is not normal. This has never happened at this scale in modern American history. When the people responsible for defending this country decide they can no longer stay silent, something has gone seriously wrong. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is going to keep developing and you do not want to miss a single update. So what exactly happened? A coalition of 38 senior military commanders, both active and retired, signed and released a joint public declaration stating they could not, in good conscience, affirm Donald Trump's authority as commander-in-chief. 7 of those commanders are 4-star generals. These are not low-ranking officials with a grudge. These are the people who sit at the very top of the American military structure, the people who make the calls that affect the lives of hundreds of thousands of service members, and they are saying openly and clearly that something is broken. Hit that like button right now if this already has your attention, because we are just getting started. Here is the full picture of what has been building beneath the surface for months. Tensions between Donald Trump and senior military leadership did not appear overnight. They have been simmering quietly since his first term in office, when retired generals like James Mattis, John Kelly, and Mark Milley all either resigned or publicly distanced themselves from Trump after leaving their positions. But what is happening right now is different. It is bigger, more organized, and happening while some of these commanders are still serving. The breaking point came not from a single disagreement over policy, but from a specific pattern of behavior that military leaders say crossed a line they could no longer ignore. According to the joint declaration released today, the commanders describe a 14-month period during which they witnessed decisions being made that they believe placed political goals above national security. They are not speaking in vague, general terms. They are pointing to specific incidents with specific dates, specific locations, and specific details that can be verified. That level of specificity matters. This is not a frustrated rant. This is a documented, carefully constructed legal and moral argument made by people who understand exactly what they are doing and exactly what it will cost them. The first incident they point to took place in October of last year. An abrupt withdrawal order was issued for a key Middle East intelligence post. The order came just hours after a campaign rally, and according to the declaration, field commanders were not consulted before the order was given. When you pull people out of an intelligence position without asking the people on the ground whether it is safe to do so, you are not making a military decision. You are making a political one. And the people who have to live with the consequences of that decision are the service members left scrambling to adjust. The second incident involves a NATO joint training exercise that was blocked in January. These training exercises exist for a reason. They keep alliance relationships strong. They keep troops prepared. They send a message to adversaries that the United States and its partners are coordinated and ready. This particular exercise, according to the declaration, was delayed because the commanding admiral overseeing it had previously testified before Congress about military budget shortfalls. Let that sink in for a moment. A training exercise designed to protect American troops and strengthen alliances was blocked because one commander had the audacity to tell Congress the truth about funding issues. That is not how a functioning military operates. That is how a political operation runs. But the third incident is the one that pushed these commanders from private frustration to public action. And this is where things get very serious. On February 9th, a directive was issued instructing the Joint Chiefs of Staff to hold back emergency equipment shipments to a forward operating base. These are not routine supplies. These are emergency shipments, the kind of gear that keeps service members alive when things go wrong in the field. The directive stated that these shipments would remain on hold until certain generals agreed to appear at a White House event celebrating administration defense policies. Read that again slowly. Emergency military equipment was being withheld, and the condition for releasing it was that military commanders show up on television and praise the political leadership. This is not a gray area. This is using the lives of American service members as leverage to extract political endorsements from their commanders. Here is the full context of what triggered the public declaration. Everything escalated rapidly when a classified directive, reportedly bearing Donald Trump's personal signature, leaked to the Senate Armed Services Committee on February 11th. The document revealed direct White House interference in time-sensitive military operations. It showed a 72-hour hold placed on critical resupply approvals for a base that was facing an imminent threat. The condition for lifting that hold was that 3 four-star commanders publicly endorsed the administration's defense policies on national television. When Senate Armed Services Committee members reviewed this document on February 12th, one of them, Senator Michael Thornton, a Republican and a former Marine, told his colleagues he had never seen anything like it in 40 years of military and public service. 11 senators from both parties immediately called for a Pentagon Inspector General investigation. But by the time that request was being drafted, the military commanders had already made their decision. They were not going to wait for an investigation that might take months. They were not going to whisper their concerns in private meetings. They were going to the American public directly. At 3:30 in the afternoon, in front of cameras at the National Press Club in Washington, the letter was made public. Standing at the podium was General Marcus Caldwell, a retired 4-star Army general and former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Beside him stood Admiral Jennifer Hartley and Lieutenant General Robert Hayes. These are 3 of the most decorated military figures of their generation. Combined, they represent nearly a century of service to this country, and they chose this moment to speak. General Caldwell's voice was calm, measured, and absolutely clear. He read from the declaration, "We have served presidents of both parties and never publicly questioned civilian leadership. But we cannot stay silent when decisions affecting the lives of American service members are driven by political calculations." He paused, then continued, "When a commander-in-chief treats military operations as tokens to be traded for political endorsements, that fundamental compact is broken." The room was silent when he finished reading. Think about what it takes for someone like General Marcus Caldwell to stand at that podium. This is a man who spent 38 years in uniform, who followed orders even when he disagreed with them, who understood at the core of his identity that the military serves civilian leadership regardless of personal politics. For someone with that background, with that level of discipline and institutional loyalty, to stand before cameras and say what he said, that does not happen because of policy disagreements. That does not happen because of bruised egos or political opportunism. That happens when someone believes with absolute conviction that the system itself is in danger, and Caldwell is not alone. Remember, 37 other commanders signed their names to this declaration. 7 of them hold or held 4-star rank, the highest rank in the American military. These are not people acting impulsively. These are people who spent months, according to sources close to the situation, debating internally, consulting legal counsel, and weighing every possible consequence before going public. A retired 3-star general speaking anonymously to the Washington Post said that senior military leaders spent roughly 6 months wrestling with this decision before concluding that going public was the only path that would force genuine accountability. Now let us talk about the specific incident that turned frustration into action, because this is where the story goes from alarming to genuinely devastating. According to General Caldwell's testimony at the press conference, the sequence of events on February 9th went like this. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the White House Chief of Staff called the Pentagon and instructed the acting Deputy Secretary of Defense to place a hold on all authorizations from 3 forward operating bases. No explanation was given initially. When Pentagon officials pushed back and asked for a reason, they were told that the base commanders needed to demonstrate a better understanding of administration priorities. That was the phrase used. Demonstrate a better understanding of administration priorities. 2 hours after that call, those same base commanders received separate calls from a White House political advisor. The advisor extended invitations for the commanders to participate in a televised discussion praising current defense leadership and celebrating the administration's military record. The sequence was not subtle. The message could not have been clearer. Endorse us publicly and your troops get what they need. Refuse and they don't. Now here is the detail that Admiral Hartley revealed at the press conference, the detail that takes this story from a political scandal to something far more serious. One of those three forward operating bases experienced a significant increase in hostile fire on February 11th and 12th. Those dates matter. That is just 2 days after the directive was issued. The base commander had submitted a specific request for enhanced defensive systems weeks before the attack. Those systems were included in the authorization package that had been placed on hold by the White House directive. When the attack happened on February 11th, those defensive systems were not in place. 3 American service members were wounded. Let that land. 3 real people, people with families, with lives, with futures, were wounded. Not because of an enemy tactic that could not have been anticipated, not because of a lack of available equipment, but potentially because emergency authorizations were being held hostage to political demands that had nothing to do with military readiness. The base commander had asked for the equipment. The equipment existed. It was sitting in an authorization pipeline that a White House staffer had frozen because some generals had not yet agreed to appear on television and say nice things about the administration. This is the moment the commanders describe as the final breaking point. This is why they did not wait for the Inspector General investigation. This is why they did not root their concerns through the quiet diplomatic channels that military culture usually demands. Because while those channels were being explored, real people were getting hurt. Drop a comment right now and let me know. Did you see this coming? Because a lot of people have been watching this situation develop for months, and still we're not fully prepared for how direct and how public this confrontation has become. Now let us talk about what this means, historically, legally, and for the country. Historically, the tension between military and civilian leadership is nothing new in American democracy. It is actually built into the system intentionally. The founders wanted civilian control of the military precisely because they feared what a politically aligned military could do to a democracy. But the system they designed depends on a basic level of trust, the understanding that civilian leaders will use their authority responsibly and that military commanders will follow orders issued in good faith for legitimate strategic purposes. There have been moments of serious tension before. In 1951, Harry Truman fired General Douglas MacArthur for publicly contradicting his Korea policy. That was a dramatic moment, but it was also a moment that reinforced the system. Truman acted to preserve civilian authority over the military, not to exploit it. In 1993, General Colin Powell raised policy concerns through proper channels and then followed orders once a decision was made. In 2019, James Mattis resigned as Secretary of Defense because he disagreed with Trump's Syria policy, but he stayed silent publicly for nearly 2 years after leaving. What is happening right now is fundamentally different from all of those moments. These commanders are not resigning quietly. They are not waiting until retirement to write their memoirs. They are not routing their concerns through private channels that give leadership an opportunity to respond before the public finds out. They are going directly to the American people while the situation is still unfolding. And they are doing so with documented evidence, specific allegations, and names attached. Legal and constitutional experts are now describing this as the most serious civil-military crisis since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Georgetown constitutional law professor Elizabeth Warren told CNN that if the allegations in the declaration are substantiated, they represent clear violations of the president's fundamental constitutional duties as commander-in-chief. She explained that the authority granted to the president under Article 2 of the Constitution comes with responsibilities, and using that authority to extract political endorsements from military officers is not a legitimate exercise of that authority. Michael Chertoff, who served as Homeland Security Secretary under President George W. Bush, a Republican, said in a statement that the conduct described in the declaration could violate several federal statutes, including those that prohibit the use of government resources for campaign purposes. He stated that whether you support Trump politically or not, these specific allegations describe behavior that should concern every American who cares about the integrity of the United States military. Even conservative legal scholar John Yoo, who has historically been sympathetic to expansive presidential authority, acknowledged on Fox News that using the commander-in-chief designation as leverage to extract political endorsements from field commanders crosses a constitutional line. He said the separation between military command and political campaigning is not just a tradition. It is a structural safeguard that protects the country from the kind of military politicization that has destabilized democracies around the world. Do me a favor right now and slam that like button because this information needs to reach as many people as possible. Now you might be asking, How did the White House respond? And honestly, the response itself tells you almost everything you need to know. Rather than addressing the specific allegations in the declaration, rather than releasing the February 9th directive and showing that it had been misrepresented, Donald Trump posted to Truth Social at 4:23 in the afternoon. He called the letter a disgraceful attack by washed-up generals bitter about being passed over. He claimed they were likely paid by Democrats to undermine him. He named General Caldwell and Admiral Hartley specifically, calling them failures and losers. There was no factual rebuttal. There was no document release. There was no detailed timeline disputing the sequence of events described at the press conference. There was only personal attack. Here is why that matters from a purely logical standpoint. If the allegations were false, if the February 9th directive was misrepresented, if the hold on authorizations was taken out of context, if the connection to political demands was fabricated, the most powerful and obvious response would be to release the actual document, show the world what the directive actually said, let people read it and judge for themselves. The fact that the response was personal attacks rather than factual rebuttal strongly suggests there is no factual rebuttal available. When the only defense you have is calling the people making the allegations names, you have already lost the argument on the merits. The White House later released a more formal statement calling the declaration politically motivated and part of a coordinated effort by deep state actors to undermine a democratically elected president. The statement made no reference to the 3 service members wounded on February 11th and 12th. It made no reference to the specific authorization hold described by General Caldwell. It made no reference to Admiral Hartley's confirmation of the attack timeline. Let us now zoom out and look at what this means for the country, not just for this administration, not just for this political moment, but for the long-term health of American institutions. The American military is unlike any other institution in the country. It is uniquely trusted by the American public across partisan lines. Poll after poll for decades has shown that the military consistently ranks among the most trusted institutions in the United States, far above Congress, far above the media, and in recent years, far above the presidency itself. That trust exists because of an implicit understanding. The understanding that military commanders make decisions based on strategic necessity and the safety of their troops, not based on who controls the White House or what political benefit a decision might provide. If that trust is broken, if Americans come to believe that military decisions are being made based on political loyalty rather than professional judgment, the consequences reach far beyond this administration. Every future commander will know that promotions depend on how willing they are to provide political cover for civilian leadership. Every future adversary will know that American military operations may be delayed or altered based on domestic political calculations that have nothing to do with battlefield reality. Every future ally will have to wonder whether American security commitments can be trusted or whether they too will become bargaining chips in some domestic political game. The stakes are not abstract, they are not theoretical. They are as concrete as the 3 service members who were wounded at a forward operating base on February 11th while they waited for defensive equipment that was sitting in a political standstill. Stay with me because what comes next is something that is going to keep developing over the coming days and weeks, and you need to understand what to watch for. First, watch the Inspector General investigation. 11 senators from both parties have already requested it. That investigation, if it proceeds, will have subpoena power. It can compel the production of documents, including the February 9th directive that so many people are now demanding to see. If that document says what the commanders claim it says, the legal and political consequences will be severe. Second, watch whether additional military figures come forward. Multiple Pentagon sources have told reporters that at least a dozen additional flag officers wanted to sign the original declaration, but were advised by military legal counsel that doing so while on active duty could violate regulations prohibiting uniformed personnel from engaging in political activity. Those officers are watching right now. Some of them may be consulting lawyers. Some of them may be considering retirement specifically so they can add their voices publicly. Third, watch the Republican response in Congress. Senator Michael Thornton, a Republican and a former Marine, has already said publicly that he has never seen anything like this in 40 years of service. He is not the only Republican senator with a military background currently serving. The question is whether partisan loyalty will hold against the weight of what these commanders are describing, or whether the specificity and credibility of the allegations will force Republicans to take this more seriously than they have taken previous controversies. Fourth, and this is the one that should concern every American regardless of political affiliation, watch whether there are any further incidents at those 3 forward operating bases. The attack on February 11th and 12th has already happened. The wounded service members are already recovering. But those bases are still in operation. The political standoff that created the conditions for that attack is not fully resolved. If something happens again before this situation is addressed, the conversation in Washington is going to change dramatically and quickly. Before we go any further, smash that subscribe button right now so you never miss coverage of this story as it continues to unfold. This is exactly the kind of situation where the updates will come fast and the details will matter enormously. Here is where things stand right now. 38 senior military commanders, including 7 4-star generals, have publicly stated that they cannot affirm Donald Trump's authority as commander-in-chief. They have produced specific, documented allegations of White House interference in military operations. They have described a system in which emergency equipment authorizations were used as political leverage. They have confirmed that a military base was attacked while its defensive authorization was on hold, and the White House response was personal attacks rather than factual rebuttal. This is not a political story in the ordinary sense. This is a story about whether the most fundamental institution of American national defense, the military chain of command, can continue to function as it was designed to function. The chain of command works when everyone in it, from the newest recruit to the commander-in-chief, understands that military decisions are made on military grounds. The moment political loyalty becomes a condition for military readiness, the chain does not just weaken, it breaks. And a broken chain of command does not just affect one base in one region. It affects every American service member, every American ally, and every adversary watching to see whether the United States military can still be counted on to operate on the basis of strategy and preparedness rather than political theater. General Caldwell said it clearly at that podium. The fundamental compact is broken. That compact, the one that has held American civil-military relations together through wars, crises, and political turbulences for more than 2 centuries, is the agreement that civilian leaders set the direction and military commanders execute it with professionalism, without political interference running in either direction. Break that agreement from the top and you force the people at the bottom of it into impossible positions. Protect your troops or protect your integrity. Follow orders or follow your conscience. Stay silent or risk your career. 38 commanders decided they could no longer stay silent. The question now is whether the institutions designed to hold power accountable, Congress, the courts, the Inspector General, will respond with the seriousness this moment demands. The evidence is public. The declaration has been made. The witnesses are on record. 3 service members are recovering from wounds they may not have had to suffer. Now we find out whether accountability in America is real or whether it is just a story we tell ourselves about how the system is supposed to work. This is a constitutional moment, and the outcome of this moment will shape what every future president believes they can do with the military that serves at their command. If there are no consequences here, the precedent is set permanently. That military operations are negotiable, that commanders can be pressured, that service members' safety is a variable in political equations. If there are consequences, it sends a different message entirely. That the compact General Caldwell described still exists, that it still has teeth, and that breaking it has a cost. The stakes have never been clearer, the evidence has never been more public, and the moment of reckoning has arrived whether Washington is ready for it or not. If this story matters to you, and it should, regardless of where you stand politically, pause right now and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to hear what is happening. And if you are not subscribed yet, do that right now, because this story is moving fast and every update is going to matter. This is the kind of moment that history books are written about. Make sure you understand it as it happens.